Hello, everybody. Yes, please feel free to sit. How's everybody doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Wait, I didn't hear everybody say I feel that. That's okay. I know it's early in the morning. So, my name is Lauren. I am 24 years old. I attend Really Living Center in Hamilton. So, I am here to discuss how to formulate a successful teen/youth Sabbath school. So, sometimes teaching a Sabbath school can be a little bit intimidating if you feel as though you don't have the knowledge to do so, or you can't relate, you don't know how to formulate a lesson plan. So, I'm here to just kind of give you a breakdown of what I have found to be successful for myself. And hopefully you can use those tools and apply them to how you do it. So I'm going to start off with everyone's favorite activity. We're going to stand and we're going to play a little game called Would You Rather. Actually, it's not Would You Rather, but it's similar to Would You Rather. So everybody could just stand up, please. I'm going to ask you a question, and if you agree with the question, you're going to come over here. And if you disagree with this question, you're going to go over here. Does that make sense? Okay, so my first question is, have you contemplated leaving the church? If you have contemplated it, if you have never contemplated it,
Or not?
just to start off. Okay, so for those who have, let's start with those who have contemplated it.
That's what I have. I'm going to go with this.
Okay, yeah. And then for those of you who have never contemplated it, what are some reasons that have kept you guys kind of That's okay. It's just yeah, no, it's totally okay. So we can go to the next one. So do you know someone who has left the church? If you do know someone, you can come over here. If you don't, you can assume.
There's 3 seats, only 2 of us back here. So you
Okay, so as we can see, all of us know someone who has left the church. So we don't have to go into the details of like why we all know the different reasons why a friend or someone who left. It's just something to think about. So agree or disagree. Engaging youth leaders help keep teens and youth stay in the church. If you agree with this, you can stay here. If you disagree, you can go there. Yeah, you can go ahead and then would you be willing to share why you're in between? And then you're saying that you disagree. Why would you be willing to share?
Oh. I think
Okay.
it's a middle.
A middle?
Yeah, I think there's a portion of youth wanting an engaged youth leader, but at the same time, they have to go through their life choices and their decisions. So yes, it's useful and helpful, but it is not the only solution.
It's not like the
whether or not
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
leaders are important in keeping you.
Sorry, I'll try to speak louder. Growing up, there was a young adult that you looked up to in your teen years in the church. If you had this, you can stay on this side. If you didn't have this, you can go on that side.
I looked up all the
Okay, so for those of you guys, okay, yeah, so we're walking. I feel like I see a lot of people in the middle. So let's start with my middle people then. What makes you choose the middle? It was that you had someone, but they weren't necessarily like ideal, or what was the rationale?
Not sure, I can share. It's yes and no for me because there were young people, like young adults that I did look up to and were close because we're someone in a small church, but not necessarily like, looking at because like I never really connected with them and really like actually engaged in the darkest relationships that I look up to or even know them. Yeah.
Okay. And then for those of you who had a young adult person that you did look up to, what was that? How did that help you in your journey with Christ at that age, at that time in your age? Yes, answer that.
It was sort of like they were an example of what I wanted to be. Like I recognized their good qualities. Like some of them, some might be really engaged in the youth, Others may find other ways of like in the IT, helping post stuff on YouTube. So just different things to look up to.
And then for us who are on this side of the wall, we feel like we didn't have someone to look up to. Did you guys think that that kind of impacted your teenage years while in church?
I think it did for me because like some of them were at church and then I saw that they were like just totally different. So it made me it's what they're preaching really what useful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you everybody. So I'm gonna ask one more question, or actually 2 more questions. Youth leaders have to know biblical theology inside and out in order to be a successful leader. If you agree with this, you can go here, but if you disagree with it, so if you didn't hear me, youth leaders have to know biblical theology inside and out in order to be successful. If you agree, over there. If you disagree, over here. The middle. Okay, so most people are either middle or they disagree. Hello everybody who's coming in. We're just playing a game. My question is, do you think that youth leaders have to know biblical theology inside and out in order to be a successful leader? If you disagree with this, you can huddle over here. If you agree with this, you can stay over there. And then while people are choosing their sides, for those of us maybe who are on this side of the room and we disagree with this, would anybody be willing to share why you feel you don't have to know biblical theology inside and out to be successful as a leader? Yeah.
I think it's more about spiritual discernment, surrounding yourself with people that could further the cause of God more than you knowing word for word. Because you could know it word for word, but you can't apply it, right? So.
Yeah. And then my middle ground people, would anybody be willing to share why they chose the middle?
What is the middle?
The middle is the aisle.
I was going to say it's not like they have to know everything perfectly, but there still has to be like a baseline, so they're not like teaching things that we don't believe fundamentally.
Yeah. Okay. And then for my disagree, why do you feel that you disagree?
This is the disagree side?
Oh, I mean, sorry, I meant to say, why do you agree?
I feel as if that if you're going to lead, you have to lead by direction and knowledge and understanding. So to lead, to carry anything, you have to, have that knowledge.
Yes. Okay, we're all gonna move some chairs forward. Everybody can have a seat also once they are in the chair. Hello, front row. Hopefully you feel comfortable with me. Hi. What's up? Okay, everybody, you can grab a seat. And if there's, we'll try to get that. Perfect. All brothers. Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Everybody has a chair?
Okay, so I have one more question, but we'll just raise our hands. The question is, I am confident that I have the skills to be an effective youth leader. You can raise your hand if you feel that. Okay, one person. That's okay. All right, so I have 3 kind of point takeaways, and for those of us, again, who just joined, this is a lesson that's supposed to really help us be able to create a proper Sabbath school lesson for teenagers and for youth. So just keeping that in mind, that's what the session is about. And I have these questions that we ask just to have us reflect on our own time as a youth and our own time in the church growing up, and how we can use that to better ourselves as youth leaders. So my first point that I want to speak about, as followers of Christ, we do have a responsibility to spread the word and message of his salvation. Would everyone more or less agree with that statement? Yeah. Now, it's important to remember that this does not mean you are responsible for those people's decisions. But instead, it means Christ expects you to share his love with those around you. Sometimes we have a focus solely on outreach. So does everybody know what outreach kind of entails? Yeah, so like a church coming together and saying we really want to bring people from outside of the church into the church, which of course is great, and that is the mission of churches at the end of the day. We're planted in communities so that we can be a light in our community and bring people to Christ. However, I really want to focus on something that I think gets cast to the side too often, and I think is really fundamental in starting your Sabbath school program, and that's in-reach. So in-reach, if you've never heard of this term, is the idea of focusing on those who are already in the church and trying to keep them there. And not just keep them there, but making them also into leaders in the future. Now, a leader doesn't have to be someone who's, giving a presentation. It doesn't have to be someone who's giving a sermon. There's so many different types of leaders in the church, and God has given us all different skills and different qualities and talents that we can all use at a leadership level in the church. So my first thing is about in-reach, and my point is, a church's vibrant in-reach program is key to help youth feel valued within your church. So as we kind of all saw, when I asked, do you know someone who's left the church? Everyone has said yes, they do know someone who has left the church. And so I really believe that youth leadership is an in-reach initiative in that sense, because if we all are here as Christians, we've been in the church, or perhaps you're new to the church, if we've known people that have left, then maybe there's something we have to change to try to keep people from not leaving, and then them also being value members in the church. So youth leadership consists of young adults or older adults who have a desire to be a mentor to the youth in their church. Now, every church is different and unique. So we're in the GTA, so majority of our churches are larger, and it also means that there's a lot of churches. So the GTA, it's a big region. It entails Mississauga, the downtown Toronto, Scarborough, Vaughan. All of this is the GTA, and so if you think about it, there's a lot of churches within this region. And so I'm going to list, and I'm going to focus on that because it's a little different than being in a smaller city. I'm from Hamilton, and we're 500,000 people, but we still have 5 churches. So 5 churches for 500,000 people, that's just our population. I don't know what the Adventist population is, but it's actually a lot of churches. And so if you're even in a smaller city, you're likely only going to have 1 or 2 churches. And so your direction with in-reach is going to be a little different. So I'm assuming most of us are GTA. Yeah? So I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to list off 2 cons of this type of church, but then I'm also going to list off the pros for this church, and the pros are actually the solutions to the cons, if that makes sense. So your first con is you are in competition. You are. If you live in the city, the area of North York, Toronto, Vaughan, Mississauga, you have a lot of options to choose from in terms of churches to go to. And so youth also have a lot of church options to go to. And it's important to recognize that teenagers are probably going where their parents are going, because they're teenagers, their parents are driving them, and that's who's taking them. And so it can be complicated, because you may say, I'm trying to create my program, but I feel like all the youth are over here, or all the youth are over there. It's too spread out. However, a pro to this size church, and actually the solution to this, is that you're going to have opportunities to network with other churches and their youth. And so if you have the opportunity, you say to yourself, my church, we're big, we're in the city, but we just don't have that many youth. They all go to another church. That's an opportunity for you to get to go know the other youth leaders in that church and say, hey, let's put together a joint youth program for all the churches in, between our 2 churches, and say we can put together something simple, like just a potluck, so everyone can get to know each other. And then every quarter we can decide, hey, let's try to, you come to my church, we'll put on the service, and then I'll come to your church and we'll put on the service, maybe once a quarter. So just ideas to being able to network and using the con of your church and then try to make it into a solution. The next one is, if you go to a big church and you happen to be a church that has a lot of youth, it can feel very overwhelming. If you're an individual and you're like, okay, God has called me to be a youth leader, but I have all these youth and I need to have them engaged. I want to make sure that my in-reach is appropriate and that people stay. That could feel overwhelming, right? But then the pro and the solution to this is because your church is larger, you're probably going to have people that are eager to serve. And maybe they're a little bit shy, and so that's an opportunity to, speak with your pastor, go up to the stand and say, hey, like, I'm one of the youth leaders at this church. We have a really robust youth population, and we want to make sure that we're really prioritizing them and making them feel special and needed, and so they want to become youth leaders too. If you're interested in this, come and talk to me. And you will have people come just because of the sheer nature of the size of your church. Does that make sense? So my conclusion to point 1, which again was in-reach focused, is if we can't keep people that are already in the church there, how can we effectively bring new people in? And if that is the end of the day, a church's goal, we have to first focus on the people within our church first, specifically on the youth. So therefore, in order to begin a successful youth program, it should be viewed in practical terms and at first as an in-reach program. So we know our focus now, in-reach, keeping youth in the church, but how do we engage with the youth? And I think this is cliche, but the real truth in keeping youth engaged is just being authentic. It's being yourself, and it's being honest to who you are. People are going to know, like I remember a point was said, if someone is living a double life. If you come to church and you're dressed in your Sabbath best and you're on the stand, you're singing, you're on the praise team, but then that night you're in the club, they're going to know. So remember that youth are going through the exact same things that we all went through. In fact, they may be going through more because of the age of social media. It is a different type of environment than maybe some of us grew up as in our high school years. But some things that are just common that most of us, I'm going to assume, probably did struggle with are alcohol, weed, party drugs, sex, image, follower count is a new thing that people actually do get stressed out about.
What is that?
A follower count is like if you're on social media and if your friend has 1,000 followers and you only have 100, you're going to feel a certain way. It's a real stress.
But that's not real life though.
Well, but it is for so many people, for so many teenagers, and even like myself, my age group, 18 to 25. Like our lives are on social media.
I didn't
like
even know that
your
existed.
image.
Wow, I just learned something.
Yeah. So it's good to know these things because like a lot of times real life doesn't feel like real life to teens. Their real life feels like their phone and what they're projecting. That making sure that everyone sees their story, that they're out at the latest party,
What
that they
makes you
have
think
friends.
it made it that would make life like that?
I think just
Because
social
I think
media
it's such a fake life. It's not real.
I think that's why it did. It's because it gives people a sense of togetherness, but it gives you a high. There's a study that says that every like you get on a photo, you actually like feel like an endorsement.
And even for the younger ones, they have this thing called the metaverse.
Yeah.
So like in the metaverse, you're like a king. You have a
What's that,
castle.
man?
Metaverse.
What is it?
So it's like a virtual reality. So in there, you're like a king. You have a castle, and people actually really believe once they come out of the metaverse that still exists.
Yeah. And I think another example could be like for those who maybe don't understand that is if you play video games, you grew up playing video games. I mean, people are dedicated to their game. They're dedicated to their character that they make and their worlds that they make. And imagine someone deleted that. You spent a year building up, your kingdom in your game, and someone just said, delete. I think you're going to feel a certain way if you, really enjoy that. So I think that's the same idea. Maybe you're not understanding like the social media world, but it's really important to know about it because it really does infiltrate young people's lives. So these are topics that youth have on their mind, and if it's not on their mind right now, well, their peers are eventually going to make it known to them. So who here learned about sex from their parents?
That's so bad. You know what?
Did you learn it? So did you learn it from your peers then?
Yeah,
like just
friends and your cousins or something.
Okay, exactly. So just keep that in mind. Like really think about it. You're learning something that's very serious and very obviously it's a part of life, but you're not learning it from your parents, who obviously had to do that to procreate you. You're learning it from your friends. And what do your friends know at 12? Okay, so remember, if the youth are involved, I just want to make this point, even if the youth that you know go to Kingsway, or they go to Crawford, they don't go to public schools, just remember that they're dealing with all the same things that we just listed, and in fact they may actually be more nervous about sharing those feelings because of the environment they're in. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. Someone who goes to a public school or a Catholic school in Ontario, which is very similar to the public school system, might be more willing to talk about it because it's just more so part of their life. But in an Adventist school, and I mean I went to Adventist school, so I guess I can speak to it more, it is a bit more hidden. And even though it's happening, it's much more not spoken about. So just important to keep that in mind. Now, why am I saying all this? So when you want to lead youth, you need to remember what it was like for yourself to be a youth. So as I said, unfortunately, many of our parents will not speak on these topics, specifically sex, alcohol, and right now weed. Marijuana, everybody smokes marijuana. Like, it's not considered a taboo thing to say, oh, like, let's go out and smoke a joint. It just is very much a part of a normal society. Or let's vape.
I mean, it was one time.
That's the thing, it was at one
I mean,
time.
in my era of growing, it's so norm now for people to just do it.
And that's why it's important to
It
realize
was a
that.
disgrace back when I was growing up. Like, they degrade you.
Yeah.
Just like any other drug.
And that's why it's important to like go into the mindset of realizing like this isn't taboo.
Yeah.
Like people just.
Well, you don't get in penalties for it anymore.
So I'm gonna give some examples of how these topics are spoken about in a public school. Again, these are things I actually experienced when I did go to public school, and then I'm also gonna say how they're taught about in the Adventist system. That's all I know. I don't know any other Christian schools, and we're gonna kind of talk about the failures there, and then how they both need to maybe fix. Okay, so in a public school, if you're in sex ed in grade 10, teachers will pass out condoms and just say, you know, use protection. You'll learn about STIs, you'll learn about STDs, but you will get a condom, at least in public school I went to. And they will say, you know, don't get pregnant. You will learn about the dangers of drinking and driving. They know they're all going to drink. All these kids in their class are going to go out on the weekend and they're going to get drunk. But let's just remind them, at least don't drive and do it. Someone just OD'd in your school because they took too much ecstasy or they took too much Molly. All right, we know they're still going to do it, even though this was one of their peers, but let's just have an assembly. Let's bring everybody together. We're going to bring the police in, and we're going to talk about the seriousness of this. But then it's just all going to go away because we know it's going to happen again in the next few years. So the failure here is there's no talk about withstanding or abstinence. The mindset is kids are going to have sex anyway, so let's just make sure no one gets pregnant. They're going to drink, so let's just remind them, do not drive when you do that. Someone died of an OD, but again, it doesn't matter. Everybody still wants to get high. They want to do Molly, they want to do ecstasy, so it doesn't matter if their peer died. They're going to do it. So let's just at least try to bring some sort of, wait, this might happen, just so they can wash their hands of that. Yes?
Yeah. I see if you went through all of these stuff. I really think it's the parents' behalf, because I totally believe. Because I have strong parents that believed in me. If you believe in your child, you're not going to let your child go astray, period. No matter what distraction in the world comes to them. And I feel as if that a lot of parents in this era of life, they seem to fail because your parents are supposed to be your biggest fans.
And that's why it's really important as like youth leaders, that's why I'm like trying to get these points across, is that if the parents aren't doing it, then it's really important that us as younger adults, as older adults, know about what's happening so that we can speak to them.
Just to add with the weed, so you can overdose on it now because they're lacing it with fentanyl and heroin.
Yeah, so much things over there. It's scary now.
I'm a mental health and addiction nurse, so I see it a lot in the youth and young adults. So they think it's just like, I don't do heroin or I don't do fentanyl, but now with weed, they're overdosing on it because they're lacing it with a whole lot of chemical. Because that dealer wants you to come back. They want to get you so addicted that you go back to them.
But how do you draw the line between, some parents don't necessarily want to share these things, and ultimately that's the parents' prerogative whether or not they're going to share these things with their kids. So as youth leaders, how do we draw that line in that, yes, we want to support them and share these things, maybe even sharing from experience, but respecting the parents' wishes?
So I'm going to go into that kind of like as we go in, just as it's really true, because like the whole point is not like, okay, like just talking about these topics just to talk about it. It's really about bringing it back to Christ. And yes, you do have to be cognitive of what a parent wants their child to hear, but I'm also talking about ages 13 to 18. So at that point, they're going to hear about it. Whether it's
regardless, so it's best to come from the
truth is,
household.
it's if the parents are going to do it and their friends are going to do it, it's at least best to be a youth leader and like have that mindset, if that makes sense. But you know, don't get your parents mad at you. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how an Adventist school would approach it, and this is just from my experience. I don't know if it's changed. Now, when it comes to sex, just don't have it. Don't even talk about it. It's not a thing. Oh, you get married and then you do it, and it's just that's it. There's nothing in between. Don't drink. Do not drink, because if you drink, you know, you'll die. Don't do drugs. I mean, if you do drugs, you're going to hell. So, okay, the failure here. There's no why. It's just don't do this, don't do that, don't do this.
Yeah, that's a rule.
There's no, there's no like actual conversation. It's just, it's a sin. Don't do it. The Bible says don't do it. So, both examples actually have one thing in common. there is no discussion about how these principles for living a better life come from God, and what He wants you, and that He wants you to live the most healthy and happy life you can while on earth. And so all of these things we're saying to abstain from and not do are good, but the way they're presented in a public school, it's just about, well, I know you're going to do it anyways, just, you know, try to be safe about it. In an Adventist school or a Christian school, it's don't do it at all, because like you're sinning, you're gonna go to hell, whatever it is. But remembering that all of these things that we're saying don't do, this comes from God, and it's not because God is punishing you. It's God is saying, I have a way for you to live a really healthy and happy life. This is just a guideline for you to follow. So my point too in all of that is your ability to be honest and authentic with youth will help create an environment of safety and engagement. Being able to speak with youth about any of the above topics and say, hey, I went through this too. This was my experience, and this is what helped me let them trust you enough to want to work with you. So whenever you speak about these topics, it's not about like, oh, I did this and it was terrible, so I had to change my life and now I'm on the straight and narrow. It's about having that discussion about how Jesus Christ transformed your life and decided to, you know, change that, so that they get a different perspective about these topics. And then, yeah, being honest and authentic. So if you're telling someone a story, it has to be the truth. It can't be like, oh, I'm going to make up a story so I can try to relate to this person. At the end of the day, if you didn't experience those things, that's fine. But then it's really important to understand them and empathize with them, because empathy is key to really getting someone to listen, to open up and talk to you. So the conclusion for point 1 is in reach. So remembering that your focus in starting a Sabbath school is to really keep the youth engaged and not leave the church. And the second point is establishing a relationship through authenticity will allow youth to look up to you as a leader, a friend, and a peer. Okay, so point 3. So we know what the focus is in reach, keeping those in the church. We learned how to get their trust by being our authentic selves and understanding what they are going through. But now, how do I actually create a program that works? So I know Sabbath school can be daunting, and Sabbath school can also be kind of boring if you really think about it. If you just read a lesson and say, okay, like, what did we learn on Monday? Let's read these verses. How do you feel about that? This is how I feel. And then you move on. Like, it can be structured like that. And for youth, for some adults, it can be very engaging because you might have some more talkative people, you may have some more engaging people, but youth tend to be a little shyer. And so, you know, when you ask the question and you ask the question, someone just goes like this. Don't look at me in the eyes. So we're going to try to, you know, work those kinks out. So we live in a world of distraction. Social media, television, movies, the internet, entertainment of all sorts is available at the tip of your fingers in a matter of seconds. So raise your hand if this applies to you. When I'm traveling on the subway, you're walking, you're on the train, or you're driving, I have to listen to music or a podcast. Okay, so I would say it's a semi-crowd, but there are some that feel like they have to. If you're scrolling through an app, so this is for those of us who have TikTok or Instagram or social media. So if you're scrolling through an app such as TikTok or Instagram Reels, I rarely watch an entire video if it's over 30 seconds. I would never.
That's
I have to be
interesting.
honest. It has to be the most engaging video. I have to be learning about how to fly with my own 2 feet. 10 seconds and I'm done. Alright, when using the internet, I get frustrated if a page doesn't open up instantaneously. Why is it taking so long? Alright, so the truth is, it's harder than ever to keep someone's attention span. And actually there was a study that says we, as humans, have less attention span than goldfish. They have a 9-second attention span, we have an 8-second attention span. So if you don't get someone's attention in 8 seconds, you've already lost them. So I know it's a lot of pressure. Hopefully I kept your attention. Speaking for longer than 8 seconds. Alright, so how do we keeping this in mind is integral to make sure you can create a program that will keep youth interested. So we're going to start off by first choosing your topic. So your topic needs to be relevant, but it has to tie back to Christ. It's great. We can talk about all these things till we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't tie back to Christ, you're failing on the first part of the mission, which is keeping people in the church for Christ. So, for example, if you want to hold a Sabbath school session on, say, the supernatural world, try to ensure that everyone leaves remembering that Christ is in control and that if you lean on Him, safety will come. So topics of interest that I think are really good Sabbath school lessons include the supernatural world or the occult, because you really recognize that that is very much infiltrated in mainstream entertainment, sex, the Sabbath, the LGBTQ plus community, having confidence in Christ, and having faith when in doubt. So these are just some examples, just of topics for teens that may be really relevant in their life and that they may want to speak about. So you've chosen your topic. Now you need to decide what your final point is. And so your point should not be abstract. Your point shouldn't be like an entire page of like, you know, you just wrote your thesis for your master's and you're writing your thesis and you're like, I don't even know what my point is at this point. I just know I have a word count. And so it shouldn't be like that. It should really just be one sentence. A great way to plan your point is to use a guidebook as a reference. So I use the Bible Study Guide Inverse. It already has lesson plans and podcasts on the lesson, and I use them as my guide for the main point, and then I try to like just use the points and structure my own kind of lesson around it. But the point of the lesson is usually in the last few sentences of the introduction, and so your point should actually be made right away, because again, that's about attention span. They don't want to wait your whole lesson to hear your point. The point should happen right at the beginning, just like an essay in that sense. Your thesis is right in the beginning, and then your bodies are what fills up your content. So a point could sound like, sorry, I had a PowerPoint just crashed on me. Okay, a point could be, Satan has glamorized the occult world to look friendly and misunderstood.
Pardon?
A point, hello?
Hi, you have 4.5 minutes. We all need to be upstairs at 11.
Okay. My point is, Satan has glamorized the occult world to look friendly and misunderstood.
Of course.
But exactly, you see how you had a reaction? Like, this is just a basic point. It's not abstract. It's like, okay, like this is what the lesson is going to be about. And then you can plan your lesson around that. So, and then another one could be, abstaining from specific foods is a way to show Christ's obedience through faith. Another one could be, the Sabbath was made for humans to enjoy. So just like simple, it wraps up what you're going to talk about, and then you can talk about it. So, okay, you figured out your topic, you figured out your point, now you got to execute it. So execution is how you keep your youth engaged. Questions and activities are vital. So I started us off with an activity. Hopefully it worked. It was engaging. This is not a sermon. This is supposed to be interactive. So, you know, a sermon is a very different thing. It's a different, it has a different purpose, but Sabbath school is not supposed to be a sermon. Sabbath school is like, it's school. It was designed to be questions and talking and interacting and learning together. So I'm going to use the example of the supernatural as my topic, because I've already spoken about it. So a good way to start off this topic is by making note about how the supernatural world is very glamorized in entertainment. So I have 3 examples here. Does everybody know the show Wednesday that just came out? Okay, did anybody watch it?
What is that?
Okay, so it's basically Wednesday is just about this girl who's kind of like, she's from the Addams family. The Addams family is kind of like, you know, they're different from society. They're witches and they, you know, do magic, and they're called outcasts. That's like the main idea. And she goes to the school where other outcasts go. So you have like, you know, supernatural like creatures, werewolves, vampires. I don't really know what she is. I guess she's a witch. Anyways, so it's one of the most popular shows on Netflix, like ever. Like everyone is obsessed with this show. Everyone's obsessed with the actress. Like, it's always on my social media. But if you watch it, it really is the celebration of being anti-Christian, and that Christians and Jesus are the villains. And Satan and his ways are just misunderstood heroes. So understanding that even though in this show, it's very apparent, that message is in almost everything we watch. Everyone is a misunderstood hero. Disney is really great at that, and I really like Disney, if anyone knows me, so it's hard for me to say that. But if you watch a Disney movie, especially new ones, like, everyone is just a misunderstood hero. Did everybody see the Avengers Endgame? Is that the one with the guy? Okay, sorry, I'm not very good at that. Yes. So Thanos, really, he had a good plan. I mean, he was trying to save the population by killing everybody. He's just a misunderstood hero. But he's painted as, like, you know, this villain. He's painted as da-da-da-da. But he's also really just, he could be a good guy. So there's always in Hollywood a mix. It's like the good is not really the good. Dark Horse, it's a song by Katy Perry. It's kind of old, but the lyrics and video are just filled with satanic and occult imagery. And listen, I used to sing the song every day when it came out, and I was like 13. But like one of the lyrics, if you listen to it, it's like it's literally her singing Satan. Hello?
So what song was that?
It's called Dark Horse by Katy Perry, and Dark Horse in and of itself is an occult symbol. So if that wasn't enough to really understand, but the lyrics, it's really her just singing to Satan, and Satan saying to her, you know, if you betray me, like, you're done, and it says it in the lyrics. So if you want to play with magic, you know, you need to know what you're messing with. Do you dare to do this? Because I'm gonna, something like a dark horse, are you waiting for the perfect da-da-da-da? Because once you're mine, there's no going back. That's not a romance song. Anyways, okay. And my third example is the Vampire Diaries, and really anything that has to do with vampires. Vampires are very romanticized. They're sexy, they're attractive, but at the end of the day, they're literally demonic creatures, and they're being glamorized as heroes because they're attractive.
And this is what the youth have to come up and watch.
Exactly.
How are they going to break away from these other?
Well, that's the thing. And so when you talk about these, and so at least you know about it, so you're aware about it, once you like maybe have this conversation, opening people's teens' eyes to like, listen, this is what you're watching, this is what's happening. State that you are emphasizing this because it's important to be aware just how much Satan has influenced popular media. This can lead into a conversation about who/what are demons, are ghosts real, what does the Bible say about contacting the dead, what happens when you die. These are all very valid questions that, I mean, I think a lot of us potentially take for granted. But some people really don't know, even within the church, especially within the youth. And if that's what you're listening to on a daily, that's what you're watching, that's the content you're taking in, that's what you're going to have on your mind. And so it's just a good way to open that, yes.
Thinking about this, it's like, we technically, if you don't consume it, you won't be able to relate to them and to help them to see where Satan is trying to infuse or take over their minds. So it's a thin line where we have to insert ourselves in these cultural things to be able to pull them out of it.
I think that what's really important, because for me, I have seen all of it, unfortunately. So like, I can sit here and say, listen, this is what you're watching. But like you're saying, maybe some of us haven't. So I think what a really important thing is, if you are planning on like really wanting to be involved with teens, is honestly doing research. Because like you said, you weren't really aware of like followers being such an influencing thing, but like it's huge. You're saying that maybe you haven't seen some of this content, so you're not understanding just how much it is in people's lives. But even if you just think about something simple as music, if you really just choose one secular song by any rap or any artist, and it's gonna have just constant sex, violence, drugs, partying. Yes.
But I think like people with mean streams, like people who know that they can influence the world, why are they not pushing positive stuff out for people to grab?
I mean, that's a different conversation, I believe, because they're in cahoots, but with somebody.
Because you have the power to make a change, right? Why are you going to use the negative to blind them?
Well, because they're following the wrong master. I mean, at the end of the day, there's two masters, and if someone is in the pop culture world, more often than not, you have unfortunately decided that's your path. I mean, I don't know. That would be my assumption. But I think it's just important to really be aware of what's going on.
I know a few years ago we did like one of the Marvel movies, and then what we did with the youth was we broke it down because there's so much symbolism in there. So we would break it down, and they were really intrigued because they're like, I didn't know that. And then we would research what the eye means or the pyramid and whatever, and they were really engaged.
Yeah, and that's awesome. That's exactly like what it should be. Like, take something that's relevant that everyone's seen, that most people do, and say, let's break it down, because this isn't just a fun movie. Like, there's serious symbolism in it.
Yeah, because it looks so creative and cool,
Exactly.
You don't realize until you people.
Okay, so I feel like we're all going. Honestly, I think I have 30 seconds left. So ensure you have questions, because like I said, more often than not, your questions will be addressed by silence. Like always. So just make sure that you also have an answer to your question, because if you start talking, someone will eventually start talking too. It's more than likely to happen. So my conclusion with this section is conclude with Christ as the answer. So this wraps up the first tip to structure a lesson, which is choosing your topic. Your end conclusion should always point to Christ. This is supposed to pique youth's interest in wanting a personal relationship with Christ. So my summarize of that is, executing a well-designed Sabbath school class for youth is about choosing a relevant topic and relating it back to Christ. Then I'm just going to summarize our key takeaways here. So we have 3. So the first one is in reach. So remembering, if you're going to start a Sabbath school, have the mindset of, I want to keep these youth in the church. I don't want to hear that someone left. Like, I want to keep them in the church. The second thing is being authentic and being honest. And honest means realizing, hey, you know what, I don't know all this stuff with what youth are going through, so I'm going to do some research before I start so that I can at least have a baseline. And being authentic is, you know what, I did the most when I was a teenager, and I'm going to be really honest about that with everyone so that they see where I am now and what I was maybe doing when I was their age. And then the third point is choosing relevant topics that tie back to Christ. And that is how I have formulated my Sabbath school lessons for the youth. That is, if there's any questions, this is question time. But if not, thank you so much for coming. I hope you, oh, great. 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes. Anybody have any further questions or thoughts? Thank you. But yeah, you know, I think it's really important. Like, it doesn't matter what age you are. Anybody can be a youth leader. I think for young adults, maybe it could be a little simpler because we're closer to the age. We're more influenced by what teens are doing. But if you're older, like, honestly, the research, like, because it's really crazy what's out there. Yes.
I'm trying to figure out this. Why is it so uncomfortable to talk about God now amongst like your workplace or like places where you meet with people and socialize? Like, I seem to realize as believers, people feel uncomfortable to talk about God, and like they try to break away from conversations about it.
I would say, for myself personally, because you're right, I would feel very uncomfortable speaking about my religion in my workplace, and I would say it's because culturally, Christianity is considered to be what's the word? Offensive to everybody. If you're a Christian, you don't believe in, you probably are not for homosexuality, you're probably against abortions. I mean, I don't know, obviously, but for the most part, you may be against something like that. You know, it goes against everything that secular society is good and is accepting. And so I think if you say it, my opinion is that someone's going to think that I'm like a hater, that I am evil.
But that's not carrying God's word and being strong with your beliefs.
Oh yeah, of course. So definitely not some good example I just gave. But I think that's why people are nervous to talk about it, because Christianity has been painted as the enemy in terms of just acceptance in society.
Okay.
Whereas I think some other religions kind of maybe get, because they're not as known in the Western world, I guess, they get maybe a bit more of like a pass in a sense, because we don't want to be offensive. Or sorry, I don't know whether
Yeah, I was just going to add to what you said. In some workplaces, you're actually encouraged not to talk about it.
Yeah, I know. That's my workplace also.
Exactly. That's going to be difficult.
It's very Western, I would say. Very North American, very European. It's discouraged to talk about religion in your workplace.
Being inclusive too, right? They don't want anyone to be but then again, this is where we are charged with finding ways of doing it and how we live our lives. That's going to be our testimony.
And that's why it's important, like as youth leaders, to say like I want to like try to teach this with the teens, because if they don't get that at that age, like they're not going to become my age or older and parents' age, and they're not going to feel comfortable having those conversations in the workforce, because it can be intimidating if you didn't already build that foundation, right?
So this is another question I want to ask. How can we keep like the youth that worship God on par with these people that break away from these stuff and do all of these? Like, how do we keep that same platform as them, be just as famous as them or more famous?
See, that's where I think that sometimes churches get confused. I think the churches really like to try to emulate the world, whether it comes to music or style of worship. And at the end of the day, I'm going to choose to go to Ariana Grande concert over going to Hillsong concert. I just am. And so if you're going to compete with the world, you're not going to win. You have to be different. I think that's the facts. Like, at the end of the day, young people don't want to be lied to. They want an authentic experience. And Christ is authentic. Christ would never have watered down anything. And so I think it's just about being honest with that and not trying to compete with the world, because the truth is the world will win if you try to compete. So you have to be different.
And I think we have to remember too that regardless of where they are, they still have that choice to choose.
Exactly.
No
That's
matter how much,
exactly.
if the creator of this world has given us the option to choose life and death, we have to give the youth the same option. You can't force anybody into ministry. You can't force anybody to choose Christ. They give us the knowledge, like you're saying, authentic, and then they choose their path.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I said that in the beginning. Like, you know, our job as Christians is to spread the word, but it's not on us what decision people make, right? We're responsible for ourselves at the end of the day, and for just, you know, being a witness.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, regardless of what's happening in the secular world, we know what the Bible says, God wins, so.
Amen. All right, on that, I think I'm going to have to say we're going to have to go, but does anybody want to close in prayer quickly? I know it's a dreaded question. I can pray, it's fine. Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this Sabbath day that we're all able to gather here together just to, you know, speak about you, speak about topics that are really needed in our church and in this world. Lord, I pray for each person here today. You know what burdens are on their heart. I pray that what was spoken about here will be taken and applied in the different churches that each person represents, and that we would have a focus on making sure not only that people come to Christ, but that people stay in Christ, those who are already here. Please be with the rest of the service throughout the day, and so pray in your name. Amen. Great. Everybody. I need to take a shower. There you go. Oh, that's like well, you know what? I have a journal, and what that means is I know how to water. It really is all it means. It means I know how to talk to people. But that's it. I mean, don't ask me to do anything else career-wise because I talk.